They carried no wagons, no endless lines of supply carts, no lumbering baggage trains crawling behind them, no kitchens, no depots, no safety net. And yet they crossed continents, an army that moved faster than any force on Earth, without stopping to eat. This was not luck, it was design. This is a story of how an army learned to live off the land, and how that decision helped build the largest land empire in history. In the early 13th century, most armies were chained to their stomachs. Medieval warfare was slow, heavy, and fragile. Soldiers marched with supply wagons stretching for miles. Campaigns collapsed not because of defeat, but because food ran out. Hunger ended more wars than swords. Kings planned wars around harvest seasons. Generals calculated how long grain stores would last. Entire campaigns stalled because oxen could not pull carts through mud. Logistics ruled everything, except on the Mongolian steppe. The world that shaped the Mongols was not a world of cities. It was grassland, endless, windswept plains where survival depended on movement. Nothing stayed still. Herds migrated. Seasons shifted violently. Winter could erase entire communities if they failed to adapt. The Mongols did not build fixed supply systems because their environment would not allow it. They built something else: self-sufficiency. A Mongol warrior did not march alone. He traveled with animals, multiple horses, sheep, goats, sometimes camels. These were not just mounts. They were mobile food reserves, transport systems, and survival kits in motion. A single rider might control 4 or 5 horses, rotating them constantly. While one ran, the others recovered. This meant Mongol armies could travel extraordinary distances without exhausting their animals. Where European cavalry burned out their horses in days, Mongol forces could sustain speed for weeks. And speed changes war. Food came from a herd. Fresh meat, milk, fermented mare's milk, dried curds, blood drawn from horses without killing them. Methods refined over centuries of nomadic survival. To outsiders, this seemed brutal. To the Mongols, it was efficiency. Nothing was wasted. Nothing required fixed infrastructure. Their diet traveled with them. An invading army normally stripped land bare because it needed to. The Mongols stripped land because they could, and because they understood how to survive when nothing remained. This system removed the greatest vulnerability of medieval warfare: dependence. European and Asian armies depended on supply lines. Cut those lines, and armies starved. Cities survived sieges by targeting logistics. Campaigns stalled because wagons could not keep up. The Mongols had no wagons to destroy, no central supply chain to sever. Their army was a supply chain. When Genghis Khan unified the Mongol tribes, he did more than create a political coalition. He weaponized a lifestyle. Nomadic survival became military doctrine. Every soldier was trained not just to fight, but to endure hunger, cold, and isolation. Discipline enforced rationing. Mobility replaced comfort. Independence replaced infrastructure. The result was an army that did not behave like an army. It behaved like a migrating ecosystem. This changed strategy at a fundamental level. Most empires advanced cautiously, calculating how far they could move before supply lines snapped. The Mongols advanced as far as their horses could carry them. They appeared where enemies believed movement was impossible. Across deserts, through winter, over mountains. Opponent prepared for sieges and set-piece battles. Instead, Mongol forces bypassed strongholds entirely, striking deep into unguarded territory. Cities fell not because walls were weak, but because the defenders were unprepared for how fast the enemy arrived. Speed created psychological warfare. Rumors outran the army itself. Stories spread of riders appearing from nowhere, vanishing before counterattack, returning from another direction days later. To enemies accustomed to predictable campaigns, the Mongols seemed supernatural. Armies that cannot be pinned down cannot be stopped. Living off the land also removed the need to protect baggage. Traditional armies slowed to defend their supplies. Every wagon was a vulnerability. Every depot required guards. The Mongols traveled light. Their protection was mobility. If threatened, they moved. If pursued, they scattered and regrouped. If surrounded, they dissolved into the landscape and reassembled elsewhere. You cannot capture what refuses to stand still, but this system demanded brutal discipline. A soldier who wasted food endangered everyone. Theft was punished harshly. Order within the army was absolute. The Mongol command structure was built on trust and fear in equal measure. Loyalty ensured survival. Disobedience risked collapse. This discipline turned nomadic habits into organized power. Without it, mobility would have been chaos. With it, mobility became dominance. The major turning point came when this system left the steppe. As Mongol forces pushed into northern China, Central Asia, and Persia, they entered environments very different from their homeland. Cities, farmland, deserts, and mountain ranges forced adaptation. Yet the core principle remained unchanged. Live off the land. Move faster than resistance. Never anchor yourself to a single supply point. The Mongols supplemented local resources with captured goods, but they never surrendered their independence. Even deep inside foreign territory, their army functioned as a moving organism. Other empires tried to copy this. None succeeded at the same scale. Because the system was not just military, it was cultural. The consequences were staggering. Campaigns that should have taken years unfolded in months. Armies expecting seasonal pauses found themselves attacked in winter. Defensive strategies built around starvation failed. The Mongols were not immune to hunger. They were immune to being trapped by it. This distinction allowed them to fight wars on their own terms. And wars fought on your own terms are wars you often win. Yet, the system had limits. As the empire expanded, governing conquered territories required stability. Cities could not live like nomads. Trade routes needed protection. Administrative centers required permanence. The very mobility that built the empire could not maintain it indefinitely. Success forced change. The Mongol state gradually adopted sedentary systems to rule what it had conquered. Supply depots appeared. Administrative hubs formed. The empire slowed. Victory planted the seeds of transformation. And transformation always carries risk. But in its rise, the Mongol army represented something revolutionary. An army freed from the chains of logistics. An army designed for motion. An army that proved survival itself could be weaponized. The legacy of this system echoes through military history. Modern warfare still revolves around supply lines, fuel, and infrastructure. Armies remain vulnerable to logistics. Entire campaigns hinge on delivery routes. The Mongols expose a terrifying possibility. An enemy that does not depend on the same system cannot be fought the same way. This lesson remains relevant centuries later. The army that lived off the land did not just conquer territory. It rewrote assumptions. It showed that endurance could be engineered, that speed could replace size, that survival skills could become strategic weapons. And above all, it proved that the greatest advantage in war is not strength. It is freedom from limitation. The Mongols carried their food with them. The Mongols carried their food with them. But more importantly, they carried a mindset, one that refused to wait, refused to slow, refused to depend. And in that refusal, they outran empires. History remembers their victories, but their true weapon was simpler. They never stopped moving, and no one else could keep up. Armies usually die slowly, not in battle, not in glory, but in hunger. They starve in muddy camps. They rot beside empty supply wagons. They retreat because bread runs out, not because courage fails. For most of history, hunger was the invisible general that decided wars, except for one army. An army that did not fear starvation. An army that turned hunger into a weapon. In the 13th century, the greatest threat to any invading force was not the enemy's sword. It was distance. The farther an army marched from home, the weaker it became. Supply lines stretched thin. Wagons slowed movement. Crops were burned by defenders. Cities emptied their granaries. Hunger followed every campaign like a shadow. Commanders planned around it. Entire strategies existed simply to feed soldiers. War was not about killing the enemy. It was about eating before the enemy did. The Mongols rewrote that equation. Under Genghis Khan, they created an army that did not outrun hunger. It absorbed it, then weaponized it. Mobility was the key. Not just speed, but independence. A Mongol army did not drag food behind it. It carried life with it. Herd animals moved alongside warriors. Horses provided transport, milk, blood, and meat. Nothing required a fixed base. While other armies marched with wagons, the Mongols flowed like water, and water does not starve. This mobility created a terrifying asymmetry. Enemies relied on cities, roads, and supply depots. Destroy those and they collapsed. But Mongol forces could survive where infrastructure vanished. They could cross deserts where no wagons could follow. They could appear in winter when other armies froze in place. And when they arrived, they did not just fight, they consumed. Hunger became a battlefield. The Mongols moved faster than defenders could harvest crops. They reached regions before armies could mobilize. Panic spread as granaries emptied and livestock vanished. Cities prepared for sieges found themselves surrounded before stores were filled. Mobility turned time into a weapon. If an enemy could not prepare food fast enough, the enemy was already defeated. The psychological impact was devastating. Traditional warfare followed rhythm. Campaign season, harvest season, winter pause. Armies respected these cycles because they had to. The Mongols ignored them. They attacked during seasons considered impossible. They moved through snow and drought. They forced defenders to fight when food was scarce and morale lower. Opponents were not just fighting an army. They were fighting exhaustion. One of the most brutal examples of this strategy unfolded during the Mongol campaigns in Central Asia. Cities that resisted were cut off from trade and farmland almost instantly. Mongol cavalry surrounded regions, intercepting relief forces and capturing livestock. Hunger spread before walls were breached. Defenders faced an impossible choice: starve slowly or surrender quickly. Many chose surrender, and surrender saved lives. Resistance did not. This was not accidental cruelty. It was calculated efficiency. The Mongols understood that hunger kills armies without risking their own. Why storm a wall if starvation will open the gates? Why waste soldiers when time could do the killing? Mobility allowed them to control time itself. But turning hunger into a weapon required discipline. A Mongol soldier could not indulge. He rationed. He conserved. He survived on less than any conventional army could tolerate. This endurance made strategy possible. Without it, mobility would collapse into chaos. With it, hunger became leverage. The turning point came when entire regions realized they could not outlast the Mongols. Fortresses designed to withstand years of siege fell in weeks. Supply routes meant to sustain resistance were cut before they were fully established. Even powerful empires discovered their wealth meant nothing if food could not move. Gold cannot be eaten. Mobility ensured the Mongols never forgot that. The consequences reshaped Eurasia. Trade networks adjusted. Defensive doctrines evolved. States began prioritizing rapid mobilization and decentralized supply systems. The Mongols forced the world to reconsider the relationship between war and logistics. They proved that survival skills could outweigh infrastructure, that endurance could defeat wealth, that hunger, controlled correctly, was more powerful than steel. Yet the weapon cut both ways. As the Mongol Empire expanded, it absorbed cities and populations that did not live nomadic lives. Administering these regions required stability. You cannot rule a sedentary empire while living entirely in motion. Gradually, the Mongol system adapted. Supply depots appeared. Bureaucracy followed conquest. The empire slowed as it settled. Victory demanded compromise, and compromise dulled the edge of pure mobility. But the lesson endured. Later military thinkers would study campaigns that succeeded or failed based on logistics. They would rediscover what the Mongols had demonstrated centuries earlier. An army that controls its hunger controls its destiny. An army that depends too heavily on supply invites defeat. The Mongols did not eliminate hunger. They mastered it. They accepted deprivation as normal. They engineered resilience into their soldiers. They built a culture that treated scarcity as a tool rather than a weakness. And in doing so, they reversed the oldest rule of war. Instead of being hunted by hunger, they hunted with it. This transformation turned fear into strategy. Defenders feared empty fields. Merchants feared interrupted trade. Rulers feared unrest from starving populations. The Mongols arrived not just as conquerors, but as accelerators of collapse. Their speed denied recovery. Their presence denied preparation. and their endurance denied relief. History remembers their victories in cities burned and empires toppled. But the deeper victory was invisible. It was logistical, a revolution in how armies survive. Mobility did not just make the Mongols faster, it made them independent. And independence is the rarest weapon in war. An army that does not need permission to eat, does not need permission to move, and an army that can always move decides where war happens. The world learned slowly what the steppe had known for centuries. Strength is not measured only by weapons. It is measured by how long you can keep fighting when everything runs out. The Mongols turned hunger into a weapon because they removed fear from it. They did not outrun starvation. They walked through it. And when enemies faced the same void, they broke. The empire that rose from the steppe did not conquer by accident. It conquered by understanding the oldest truth of warfare. Armies march on their stomachs. The Mongols simply made sure there's never stop marching. And in that relentless motion, they outran history itself. Empires are not built by armies alone. They are built by systems, invisible systems, unseen networks, structures that move faster than soldiers and last longer than kings. The Mongols did not conquer half the known world because they were fearless. They conquered it because they were organized. Behind every thunderous cavalry charge stood something quieter and far more powerful, a logistics system that turned movement into dominance. When people imagine Mongol warfare, they picture riders emerging from dust, arrows darkening the sky, cities falling in flames. What they do not see is the machinery beneath the chaos. No empire expands across continents without solving the oldest problem of war. How do you keep an army alive when it outruns its homeland? Most empires answer that question with roads, depots, and slow-moving supply chains. The Mongols answered it with structure. Under Genghis Khan, the Mongol military was reorganized into a precise decimal system. Units of 10, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s. This was not just a way to count soldiers. It was a way to manage survival. Every group was responsible for itself and for each other. Supplies were shared. Losses were absorbed collectively. Discipline was enforced through mutual dependence. No soldier was isolated. No unit was allowed to collapse alone. This structure created resilience. The Mongol army functioned like a living organism. If one part weakened, others compensated. If a unit lost horses, replacements were drawn from shared herds. If supplies ran thin, redistribution was immediate. European armies depended on centralized command for logistics. The Mongols decentralized survival, and decentralization made them harder to break. But the true backbone of the empire's logistics was not just the army. It was a network, a communication, and transport system stretching across Eurasia, a web of relay stations known as the Yam. The Yam was revolutionary. Fresh horses waited at fixed intervals across conquered territories. Messengers could ride at extraordinary speeds, covering distances that would take normal couriers weeks. Orders moved faster than rebellion. Intelligence outran resistance. The empire was not just expanding, it was staying connected. This network did more than deliver messages. It moved supplies, officials, and information with relentless efficiency. Governors coordinated across vast distances. Armies received updates in real time. Trade routes were protected and regulated. The Mongol Empire became the fastest administrative system the medieval world had ever seen. Speed was no longer just military. It was bureaucratic. The turning point came when conquest demanded permanence. Raiding could build fear, but ruling required stability. The Mongols adapted their logistics from war to governance. Cities were integrated into the network instead of destroyed when they surrendered. Artisans were relocated strategically. Engineers traveled with armies. Specialists were spared and reassigned. Talent became a resource, and resources were managed deliberately. The empire did not just consume territory, it reorganized it. Food distribution evolved alongside military movement. While Mongol armies lived off herds and captured supplies, conquered regions were taxed and cataloged. Grain stores were tracked. Livestock inventories recorded. The empire began to understand itself as an economic machine, and machines require maintenance. This shift transformed the Mongols from raiders into administrators. Their logistics system was no longer temporary. It was institutional. The yam expanded. Roads were maintained. Way stations doubled as intelligence hubs. Merchants were protected because commerce fed the empire. Trade was not a byproduct of conquest. It was a pillar of survival. The consequences were staggering. The Mongol Empire unified trade routes from China to Europe. Goods, ideas, and technologies moved with unprecedented speed. Diseases did too. The same logistics that enabled conquest also accelerated global connection. For the first time in history, Eurasia functioned as a loosely integrated network. And the Mongols were architects. Yet the system demanded constant discipline. Corruption threatened relay stations. Local officials abused authority. Distance tested loyalty. The empire responded with ruthless enforcement. Inspections were frequent. Punishments swift. Merit mattered more than birth. Efficiency was sacred, because inefficiency killed empires. The Mongols understood a truth many rulers ignored. Victory is easy compared to maintenance. Conquest wins wars. Logistics wins time. And time decides history. The empire reached its peak not because it was unstoppable, but because its systems delayed collapse. Communication prevented fragmentation. Mobility suppressed rebellion. Resource management sustained armies far from the steppe. For decades, this machinery held. But no system is eternal. As the empire grew, coordination became harder. Regional rulers gained autonomy. Cultural differences slowed integration. The network stretched to its limit. The very scale that made the Mongols powerful began to strain the system that sustained them. And when logistics falter, empires follow. The Mongol world did not fall overnight. It fractured gradually. The yam weakened. Communication slowed. Regional identities hardened. Successor states emerged. The logistics system that once unified continents became localized. And the empire dissolved into memory. Yet its legacy endured. Later empires studied its methods. Relay systems inspired postal networks. Military organization influenced future command structures. Trade corridors remained active long after Mongol rule faded. The infrastructure outlived the conquerors. That is the mark of true power. The Mongols proved something that history rarely forgets. Armies conquer territory. Logistics conquers time. An empire is not unstoppable because it wins battles. It is unstoppable because it moves, feeds, communicates, and adapts faster than its enemies. The Mongols mastered all four. For a moment in history, their system outran everyone else's, and that moment reshaped the world. The logistics behind the Mongol Empire were not glamorous. No hero songs celebrate relay stations. No monuments honor inventory lists. But without them, the empire would never have existed. Warriors rode into legend. Systems carried them there. The lesson is timeless. Strength without structure collapses. Speed without coordination burns out. Power without logistics is temporary. The Mongols built an empire that seemed unstoppable because they understood what others overlooked. Victory is not sustained by courage alone. It is sustained by the quiet architecture behind it. The roads, the horses, the networks, the discipline, the system. And for one extraordinary century, that system carried an empire farther than the world believed possible. Not by magic, not by fate, but by design.